Anime go to Netflix to die hard, and The Great Pretender is no exception. This anime has been relentlessly attacked by low scores from butthurt Attack on Titan fans because which studio stopped working on their favorite show. Being stuck in Netflix jail hasn't helped The Great Pretender either. But fortunately, people are finally giving the show some of the attention it deserves. Perhaps also the first episode being half in terrible English lowered a few people's interest, but I swear to God, this is the most hilarious running joke. A quick frame informs us, the English is so bad that from here on out, it will be all in Japanese for convenience. And yet, the show insists on informing us multiple times that the main character's English accent is terrible. Of course it is, he's speaking Japanese! Regardless, judging by how every other Netflix original usually has English actors, and the fact that later on in the show, they use fluent French and Mandarin voice actors, I guess we just got epically trolled here. This fusion of multiple different cultures that each case explores, it really clues us into how capitalism has reached its highest stage, imperialism. These may be loosely connected events narratively, but the big picture is that these minority of elite people, from the hack Hollywood director that is a drug trafficker, to the sleazy scumbag Saudi princes, and even to the smug art appraiser, all are connected to a web of global exploitation of the majority of people. What better way to immediately explore this theme than to start off the first case by going to an endless deteriorating cesspool of pretenders. Time to make the Los Angeles connection. The first case of The Great Pretender, which comprises the first 5 episodes, takes place in Hollywood as our protagonist Makoto Edamura gets roped into a long con on a hack Hollywood director. As such, I find it only fitting to break this arc down by paralleling it to the Hollywood movie Die Hard. Both Edamura and John McClane, the protagonists of Die Hard, are common men dragged into dangerous situations requiring their cunningness. Despite these similar molds, both characters take opposite roles. McClane is the cliché off-duty cop taking his job more seriously than his estranged wife, while Edamura is just a literal virgin falling right into a multi-level marketing scheme, a true MLM. Edamura struggles with the fact that he is discriminated against by society for simply his relation to his criminal father, and he eventually stumbles down the same outcast path, participating in fraud. He is assured by a sickly mother after telling her how no employer will hire him, that truth is something that nobody really knows. All you can do is believe in yourself. When his mother passes, he comes to terms with the fact, knowingly or not, that the system of capitalism is predicated on deceit. If employers would not hire him because of his history, he decides to become a self-employed swindler. A similar theme for both John McClane and Edamura is that the world at large is against them, and neither ever catches a single break. They both have many flaws and weaknesses, so their only way of overcoming problems is their sheer cunningness. Simultaneously, they are people we feel sympathetic towards, and people we can't help but think are badass. I first watched Die Hard with my insane reactionary dad. It is an action flick where a group of terrorists take over the Christmas party of the Japanese corporation Nakatomi, so that the terrorist leader Hans Gruber can rob millions of dollars from the tower's vault. Somehow, according to my father, this movie is thus a critique of an evil globalist conspiracy. Now, I'm still not entirely sure what brought up this horrible take, that this movie has a message against the globalist. Is it simply xenophobia because this corporation with a vault of wealth is Japanese? I couldn't Google search any crazy right-wing movie reviews on why Die Hard is an anti-globalist movie to really explain this. And please understand, I only wonder rhetorically where my dad's head is at, and I don't much care to understand his mind fully. Whom I did discover talking about the globalists in Die Hard, however, just so happens to be the perfect straw man, a liberal. In a podcast episode of Script Notes discussing Die Hard, the podcaster named Craig Mazin had a Freudian slip where he called 2 particular characters globalists. He was referring to the moment in the movie where the foolish FBI directors made a rash decision to fly their helicopter on the rooftop when the terrorists had explosives at the ready. Since this episode is locked behind a paywall, I'll just be having one of my friends read Craig's words from the transcript.
Just like John McClane warned them, but because they are elitists, probably globalists, they don't care. They are too self-assured, and through one of the strangest exercises of chain of command ever, they make one of the dumbest possible decisions that no police department. I mean, police must have been so frustrated watching these things back then, but regardless, it goes poorly for them.
See, Craig possesses a certain type of self-assured liberal ideology that simmers down to a few bad apples spoiled the bunch. He is currently on his Twitter page railing against anti-maskers, retweeting Russia hysteria, and also sharing his support for Black Lives Matter with weak demands for police reforms. Craig is the type of person not exactly wrong by identifying these real problems, minus the Russia hysteria, but the notion he seems to be putting forward that ousting Trump and replacing him with Biden will fix anything, when Biden himself has specifically said nothing will fundamentally change under his administration, is a naive thought. To be clear, I don't see the police force as a few bad policemen and their evil commander-in-chief ruining the rest, but rather, the force itself is not trained to protect citizens. The force is trained to punish anyone deemed dissident. When Biden helped pass the crime bill and even more recently called for more protesters to be prosecuted, how am I supposed to take anything Craig advocates seriously?
Every time Richard Nixon, when I was running in 1972, would say law and order, the Democratic mantra, the response was law and order with justice. Whatever that meant. And I'd say lock the SOBs up.
I should mention, Craig wrote the script for the HBO series Chernobyl, which is so charged with political bias, it is revolting. He may as well be the epitome of the Hollywood hack, which exactly like the show Chernobyl and the movie Die Hard, boil down the failure of leadership on mere incompetent actors, looking to cover their own asses. The Revolution Reports video, Fact and Fiction, HBO's miniseries Chernobyl review, excellently critiques the show for this revisionism of complex historical events to merely push an anti-Soviet narrative. I'd recommend watching the whole video to understand the full breadth of how this series lies. But basically, as the Revolution Report points out, instead of showing the hundreds of nuclear scientists the Soviet state called in to solve a nuclear problem, the miniseries Chernobyl decides having one made-up anti-Soviet scientist is more convenient for the narrative. In an odd reversal of this, instead of Craig identifying the entire American system inhibits our collective rights, therefore making an adequate response to COVID-19 impossible no matter who is in charge, the blame is placed solely on Trump's administration. Craig even tweeted earlier this year comparing Mike Pence and the entire administration to the police chief in Die Hard. I can hear Craig now. Just vote for Democrats in November. It will be alright. All we need is John McClane and an empathetic guy with a gun to save the day. I don't want to completely strawman Craig further, as he made some fair critiques of the movie Die Hard, by aptly criticizing many of the backward social statements. And to be completely fair, if you had to blame a singular person for all the modern world's flaws, then Ronald Reagan, whom Craig bashes throughout this podcast for being present during this film's making, is a fair enough choice. While Great Pretender handles a diverse mixture of cultures and language with a lot of tact, Die Hard only has issues upon issues. Craig describes Die Hard's latent racism in one example.
Holly has a housekeeper nanny. She's meant to be Latin American of some kind. She is Latina. Her accent is bizarre. I get the feeling that that actor may not have actually had that accent. Also, they did a thing that movies used to do with people like that. Characters who were from another country would insist on speaking back. They can understand English clearly, so Holly speaks to her in English, and the nanny answers back in half English, half Spanish, pointlessly. Like for instance, she'll use the word sí instead of yes, just pointlessly as if to say, see, I'm from another country, but I'm nice. It's bizarre.
Due to the myriad of these Reaganite flaws, I'd argue it's about time to bury the movie Die Hard 6 feet under. I wouldn't fault anyone for watching it on Christmas Day for mindless indulgence, but as Renegade Cut's video on Die Hard makes known, this movie has spawned so many uninspired derivatives and pointless sequels that really demonstrate just how much Hollywood has deteriorated from the baseline of an already abhorrent abomination. Following such insight into this feeble liberal ideology trickling down into society, I realized that Die Hard has a lot more similarities with the first case of Great Pretender than I initially thought. Casanova even says to Edamura that his movies are about tough men, fighting no matter how tough things get. So, Great Pretender is most certainly taking a jab at specifically American action film schlock here. Additionally, both stories are about organizations trying to steal money using deceit. In the case of Die Hard, it is a terrorist organization led by Hans Gruber, whereas Great Pretender operates more like a leaderless cooperative. But what I find most striking in this comparison is the con artist Laurent, who lures Edamura to the familiar location of Los Angeles, tells him this fact very relevant in both stories.
Yeah? And what do they believe?
What they want to believe. A truth that happens to be the easiest to swallow.
We find out what their deepest dreams are and sell them an illusion that looks just like the real thing.
The entire scheme Hans Gruber plans is based on the deception that those trying to stop him will think their terrorist group has certain demands. In actuality, Hans has no grand convictions and is just a thief. He desires nothing other than the money. Don't get me wrong, this is an absolutely terrifying revelation. But imagine how much more depth this movie could have if Hans was an actual eco-terrorist. This would not make his actions of taking hostages redeemable, but as it stands, his immoral nature purely exists to contrast with the good cops. So in a way, Hans Gruber in Die Hard is the movie's convenience, as there isn't much depth beyond his terrifying visage and the visceral action. He, along with his fellow European terrorists, who were all wasted and used up, foil directly with the incompetent FBI and the police chief. This leaves only one possible conclusion, which is, to quote Greg one last time,
The only people who could save you in the end are just good old American men.
In contrast, the main convenient truth in The Great Pretender purposely reveals the societal mind rot of the drug lord Hollywood director Eddie Casanova, whose career is built on a foundation of lies and looting. Edamura is supposedly chosen as the cream of the crop of all Japanese con artists because, well, Laurent needed a Japanese person to make a fake drug deal with Casanova. Casanova takes pride in this cheesy movie franchise, Razi, like it is his own child. This movie about a samurai defeating men with his chopsticks is somehow even more off the wall than even the plot of Ninja Slayer, which itself is a parody of what a ninja story written by Gaijin would look like. With this advanced knowledge of Casanova's work, Laurent tricks the drug lord that this smart-looking Japanese doctor has invented a synthetic drug so incredible it provides instant euphoria. It is an incredibly stupid scheme. But Great Pretender makes no hesitation to mock these moronic stereotypes of Asians and how easily people will fall for what they want to believe. I mean, just look at the recent trending TikTok videos of Chinese children doing a cooperative gym exercise, which was interpreted by xenophobes as brainwashing, or even how the lead actress of Mulan is cancelled because her support of the CCP is in ideological opposition to most Westerners. As such, The Great Pretender just nails everything wrong about America's individualist culture, which Die Hard by its approach with John McClane tried to enshrine and separate from what it showed as the bad individuals, climbing up in the corporate ladder, federal bureaucracy, and terrorist organizations. Harry Ellis snorting coke and partying hard with his cushy job is as American as it gets, honestly. He isn't just a scumbag. I mean, he is, but he is also symbolic of the American dream. You may not like it, but Harry Ellis is just the product of capitalism. The Great Pretender openly critiques this dream, as actors who come to Casanova looking to climb up the Hollywood ladder only manage to end up junkies and sex slaves. It isn't that they chose this lifestyle. They assuredly all had their overly ambitious goals and aspirations, but they live in a society. As Casanova sardonically remarks, what an awful American dream. Despite how colorful and energetic The Great Pretender is, the small window into Casanova's underworld makes this case so much more sinister. Using some clever framing, however, the anime manages to tackle this very serious issue in a more family-friendly way. In episode 4, Edamura forms a surprising connection with the gang boss, Salazar, when he notices that he has a son that forms his motivations. Salazar is only a bodyguard for Casanova because he wants money to make his son's life better and probably less precarious than his own. In this process of getting his hands dirty, however, Edamura sees in Salazar a similar figure to his father that is destined to meet a tragic end. Edamura's father was a defense lawyer, the type of attorney who, if he lived in Hollywood, Los Angeles, would probably be defending Casanova's impunitive ass. His life was ruined when it was discovered he was a surety in a child trafficking plot, supposedly going to use his lawyer skills on the occasion of the two others involved getting caught. Not a great guy at all. In fact, he completely tarnished his family's reputation as a result. Before, there was only a glimpse of the Casanova family's underworld. However, what we were shown only through Edamura and Salazar interacting is the impact this type of evil in the world has on children. As a kid, Edamura's father told him that morals are more important than studying, so when he sees how distorted the world's morals really are, it destroys him. It is not a pretty subject at all, which is likely why it was approached in such a low-key manner. But Casanova is an archetype of so many corrupt, rich people in the real world, aka Harvey Weinstein, Epstein, and Maxwell Christine, to name merely the tip of the iceberg in America, land of capitalism. Sure, these few have been caught, and at least 2 of these examples will have totally killed themselves, but a person like Epstein was initially above the law. America's legal system isn't designed to prosecute these people. It's designed to protect them and prevent collateral damage. Meanwhile, countless other villains assuredly run free by paying off or silencing anyone who dares investigate the skeletons in their closets. Salazar says it himself. He is a part of the underclass. A single father, and especially one who is an immigrant, won't have an easy time raising a child. So despite being a hired bodyguard, he could care less if Casanova gets cheated by con artists. Not really part of his job description. Salazar is threatened by Casanova at one point that he'll become his scapegoat and take the drug charges levied against him. No matter how much dough Salazar makes, he will be unable to make his son happy serving under a scumbag like Casanova. In the same fashion of alienation, Edamura is distraught by his new role in the scheme. The con has gone so far that not only has he sold the blueprints to Soccer and Magic, but he must become Walter White and manufacture the drugs in Casanova's audience. Edamura had been all game for the con up until this moment, since there's nothing immoral about scamming Casanova, obviously. But now that he actually has to touch drugs, the doubts begin to stir. When he gets intercepted by the cops and is asked to cooperate to take Casanova down, it makes sense why he agrees. Edamura is still being pushed around by them as they won't even accept his basic terms of protecting Salazar. But it's not like his friends Laurent and Abby weren't coercing him either. When the drug deal takes place as planned, the FBI swarm the building using Edamura's information. Then Laurent and Abby get shot. I mean, this is Edamura's first case. He isn't going to be perfect at his job. Seeing an opportunity, Casanova escapes out of there only to be tackled by an enraged Edamura. Unsurprisingly, our skinny boy gets clobbered, but Salazar comes in and gets the last blow on Casanova himself. Very fitting. Knocked out and defeated, Casanova finds himself face to face with the FBI agent Paula. Before the real identity of Paula Dickens is revealed, she is exactly what the liberal Craig would refer to as that dirty elite globalist. She offers to throw away the evidence of Casanova's crimes if he pays her team a whopping $100 million, which is 10 times what Laurent and Edamura were selling their fake Soccer and Magic at. This increase in scale is what I love about this first case. Starting small with a multi-level marketing scheme for nutrient drinks, moving to a fake drug deal, and proceeding all the way up to FBI extortion of the highest proportion. While the movie Die Hard had a similar plot that worked like clockwork, with the money vault having intricate steps required to open, it never made any great political statements, like The Great Pretender is able to tie together here. Through Paula Dickens' line, America is a country of freedom and capitalism. While in fact this Paula Dickens is not part of the FBI at all, but a cadre member along with Laurent and Abby, this line still remains very revealing about America and whom law and order actually serve. Earlier, Casanova was able to buy himself out of prison and pay off the police officer in charge of his investigation with specific promises of Gucci. Only people taking matters into their own hands were able to carry out justice. To illustrate just how real this is, there have been recent stories in America of the police sitting around not breaking up a child trafficking ring in Milwaukee, while the community took the job upon itself to do so. Really makes you wonder, protect and serve whom? Die Hard places the responsibility of this incompetence on police chiefs and FBI agents, but overall defends that system by concluding that ordinary cops should wear their uniform proudly and pull their trigger with confidence, as seen by the policeman Pal's character arc being finished by finally having the courage to shoot the evil Russian terrorist. The Great Pretender, on the other hand, just goes straight for pointing out, quite literally, that the very system is fundamentally broken. Returning to the bargaining table where Casanova makes his final plea to retain his freedom, he nonchalantly agrees to hand over his $100 million in cash, most of which is secretly stashed in a Swiss bank account, to the fake Paula Dickens. This is just business to him, and another hard lesson learned, since before this case even started, he just got out of jail and learned it there as well. It is a complete cycle for these rich elites who work hand in hand with the state that protects them. Only organized groups of cadre and a vanguard party can break it. The team takes Casanova's money, but also takes evidence of his drug trafficking and sends him straight to prison, where he meets the real Paula Dickens. Considering Jeff Bezos recently hit the $200 billion net worth in the real world, it'd be nice to do a similar scheme to him and give back to all the people he looted. Obviously, the show doesn't advocate anything like becoming con artists, but the show does ask one to engage in political consciousness, lest one buy into a convenient truth and get duped. For Edamura, the first case in Los Angeles was a true awakening, as there were so many ups and downs for his character. At the end of it all, he remains incredibly humble. Instead of keeping his share of the millions of dollars their team stole, he hands it over to the police in Japan to give back to the people he swindled. call it taking responsibility, or in my opinion, call it what it really is, just some genuine compassion for the people he hurt. The American dream, that one should make as much money as possible at the expense of others, is a terrible one. I don't really like that Edamura thought he should spend a few years in jail to atone. I mean, he could have just became a monk or something. But it does make his character way more nuanced than simply a self-centered con man. Also, his time in jail will be a direct setup for the next arc, where Edamura will be in need of the mechanic skills that he acquires serving his time. In my next video on the Singapore air race, I'll be comparing Edamura and John McClane's flight skills. I jest, that's not what the next video is going to be about. But please ring that bell and subscribe for more content to come. Along with the rebranding to Weeb Revolution, we started a new patron page, so I'm really happy to announce our first patron, Airwav. Your support is greatly appreciated.